My name is Sam Reeves, and I want to tell you something that most species figure out too late about humans. We are not impressive at first glance. We are not impressive at first glance. We are not the tallest, or the strongest, or the most fearsome looking. When you see us for the first time, nothing about us suggests that we are worth paying attention to. And that, more than anything else, is exactly why we survive the things that finish everyone else. I had been working the outer Dravosi trade routes for 4 years when I picked up the distress signal. It was faint, old and broadcasting on a frequency that had not been in standard use for over a decade, which told me that whoever sent it had been sending it for a very long time without anyone answering. I answered. The source was a small vessel, damaged badly, drifting in the debris field on the far edge of the belt where nothing worth finding usually was. I brought my hauler alongside carefully, because debris fields have their own patience and their own way of making you regret carelessness, and I matched drift and extended the docking bridge and went across. The ship inside was dark and cold and had been both for a long time. The life support was running on backup power so thin that another week would have finished it. I moved through the corridors with my torch and found the crew quarters and found the single occupant still in her emergency stasis pod, alive because the pod had kept her alive through sheer stubborn engineering, long after everything else on the ship had given up. She was Tethian, which I recognized from the pale gold skin and the hair that moved slightly, even in still air. The pod readout told me she had been in stasis for 8 months. I brought her across to my ship and spent 4 hours slowly, carefully bringing her out of stasis the way the emergency medical guide instructed, checking every reading, adjusting every level, because rushing it was the one thing guaranteed to cause serious harm, and I had not pulled someone out of an 8-month stasis pod to hurt them in the last step. When she finally opened her eyes, she looked at the ceiling of my medical bay for a long moment without moving. Then she turned her head and looked at me. I gave her what I hoped was a reassuring expression. "You are safe," I said. "You are on a human cargo hauler. My name is Sam. You have been in stasis for approximately 8 months. Take your time." She looked at me for a long moment with dark, careful eyes. "Human," she said. Her voice was rough from disuse but steadied quickly. "Yes," I said. "You answered the signal," she said. "You were broadcasting," I said. It seemed impolite not to. Something moved in her expression that I could not fully read yet. Her name was Lyra Sale, and she was a research courier carrying biological survey data from a Tethian university program to a station on the far side of the belt when a debris strike had taken out her navigation and propulsion systems simultaneously. She had managed to get the distress signal running before entering stasis, and then she had waited. For 8 months, she had waited. I made her something warm to eat from my limited supplies, and she sat in the small galley and ate it slowly, and told me what had happened with the precise, detailed memory of someone who has had a great deal of time alone to go over the sequence of events. "The signal was on an old frequency," I said. "Most ships would not have caught it." "I know," she said. "I use the old frequency because it broadcasts further on minimal power." She paused. I did not know if anyone would answer. "Someone always answers eventually," I said. She looked at me across the galley table. 8 months, she said quietly. "You had a good pod," I said. "Well built. Tethian construction," she said. "We build things to last." "I noticed," I said. The nearest station with full Tethian medical facilities was 6 days out, which gave us 6 days in a hauler that was not built for 2, but managed it adequately. She rested for the first 2 days because 8 months of stasis takes something from a body that rest is the only cure for. And I flew the route and checked on her and did not push for conversation because she would talk when she was ready and not before. She started talking on the 3rd day. She came to the cockpit in the 3rd day. She came to the cockpit in the early hours of the morning station time, when I was running the quiet part of the route on autopilot and drinking coffee and watching the belt move past in the dark. She sat in the co-pilot seat without asking, which I took as a good sign, and looked out at the debris field for a while before she spoke. "The survey data I was carrying," she said. "It was in the ship's core drive." "I know," I said. "I brought the core drive across when I brought you. It is in the storage locker behind you." She turned and looked at the locker and then back at me. "You went back for it," she said. "It was important to you," I said. "That was clear from the manifest." She was quiet for a moment. "You did not know me," she said. "No," I said. "It was not your cargo," she said. "No," I said again. "Then why?" she said. I thought about how to explain it, because it was one of those things that felt obvious from the inside, and clearly was not from the outside. Because you had spent 8 months in a stasis pod waiting for someone to answer a signal, I said. The least I could do was make sure that when you woke up, you still had what you had been trying to deliver. She looked at me with those dark, careful eyes for a long time. The reports about humans, she said slowly. What about them? I said. My university program includes xenobiology, she said. I have read the assessments. They describe your species as mid-tier across most categories. Physically average, short-lived, technologically competent, but not exceptional. Sounds about right, I said. They do not describe this, she said. Which part specifically? I said. She thought about it seriously, the way she seemed to think about everything, with the full weight of her attention. The part where you answer an 8-month-old signal on a frequency nobody uses anymore, she said. The part where you spend 4 hours bringing a stranger out of stasis correctly instead of quickly. The part where you go back for someone else's data because it mattered to them. She paused. None of the reports mention any of that. The reports measure the wrong things, I said. What should they measure? She said. I looked out at the belt, all that dark rock and cold light moving in the deep quiet of space, and thought about 4 years of trade routes, and all the empty distance between stations, and the particular feeling of being the person who answered when someone called. Showing up, I said. That is the whole thing, really. Showing up when it would be easier not to. The reports never measure that. The reports never measure that. She was quiet for a long time after that. The belt moved past, and the coffee went cold, and the autopilot held the route steady, and she sat in the co-pilot's seat, looking out at the dark with an expression I was learning to read. On the 4th day, she asked me about Earth, and I told her about it the same way I always did when someone asked, honestly and at length, because Earth deserved to be described properly, and most people who asked had only read the census summaries. On the 5th day, he told me about Teth, and I listened properly, which she seemed to notice. On the 6th day, the station appeared on the long-range scanner, and we both saw it at the same time, and neither of us said anything for a few minutes. She had a university contact waiting for the survey data, and a medical team standing by in a communication queue that had been building for 8 months. She had things to do and people waiting, and a life that had been paused for 8 months, and was ready to resume. I had a delivery schedule, and a trade route, and a hauler that needed its port thruster looked at before the next long run. At the docking bay, she stood with her core drive under her arm and looked at me, with those dark, careful eyes, and I waited because she was clearly composing something. The xenobiology reports, she said finally. I am going to write an addendum when I get back. About humans, I said. About what the reports miss, she said. What will you say? I said. She thought about it one more time with that full and serious attention. I will say that humans show up, she said, that they answer signals nobody else hears, that they go back for things that matter to other people, that they spend 4 hours doing something correctly when 2 hours would have been easier. She paused, and that the most important thing they do is make you feel, without ever saying it directly, that you were worth answering. I did not have a response to that, which was unusual for me. She nodded once, the way people do when they have said the thing they meant to say, and walked through the docking bay doors. I stood there for a moment and then went back to my hauler and checked the port thruster and filed my delivery report and set a course for the next run. 3 weeks later, on a frequency I checked out of habit more than expectation, I received a message. It was from a Tethian University. Tie address, and it was short. It said the addendum is filed. Thank you for answering. I read it twice. Then I set it aside and flew my route. But I was smiling for the rest of the day, and the day after that too, and that is the thing about showing up for people. Sometimes they show up back, and that is worth more than any census report ever written about any species anywhere in the known galaxy.